Brazilians began a tense wait for results of their down-to-the-wire presidential runoff election after voting closed in the divisive showdown between incumbent Jair Bolsonaro and former leader Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula's Workers' Party cried foul on Sunday over police roadblocks it alleged were aimed at suppressing votes in his strongholds, especially the impoverished Northeast. With 80.9% of voting machines counted, Lula had 50.3% of the vote, compared with 49.7% for Bolsonaro. The Superior Electoral Court reported on its website. Lula, who was president from 2003 to 2010, won the first round on October 2nd, but by a much smaller margin than expected by pollsters. This is not an updated... Lula da Silva narrowly defeats Jair Bolsonaro. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has won Brazil's election after defeating incumbent President Jair Bolsonaro in a razor-close vote. According to the country's election authority, Lula secured 50.8% of the vote. That's what we just said, but like the article didn't actually declare him the winner. Bolsonaro had been leading throughout the first half of the vote count, and as soon as Lula overtook him, cars in the streets of downtown São Paulo began honking their horns. People in the streets of Rio de Janeiro could be heard shouting, "It turned." And it was Brazil's most polarizing election since its return to democracy in 1985, after a military dictatorship that Lula, a former union leader, rallied against, and Bolsonaro, a former army captain, invokes with nostalgia. It remained to be seen if Bolsonaro, 67, would concede defeat without proof. He has described the voting system as fraud-prone, raising concern he may not concede, following the example of his ideological ally, former U.S. President Donald Trump. Already gotten ugly in Brazil. This is video of a pro-Bolsonaro congressperson threatening voters with a gun.
Cara Zambelli armado aqui, galera. Cara Zambelli armado aqui, ó. Cara Zambelli armado aqui, galera.
Followed him into a fucking store and shit.
É a Zambelli, é a Zambelli. Olha, cara Zambelli, ó, gente, armada.
Apparently this woman is elected to office in Brazil. Pro-Bolsonaro congresswoman aims gun at man in the street as campaigns for Brazil's heated presidential race drew to a close ahead of a runoff vote. One of President Jair Bolsonaro's closest associates was filmed chasing a supporter of rival candidate Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva with a gun on Saturday. So this took place yesterday. Today, rampant allegations of voter intimidation. However, Lula was still able to pull it off. Police accused of pro-Bolsonaro voter suppression in a high-stakes presidential race. Reports of police officers in Brazil blocking key highways and pulling over buses filled with voters on the way to the polls Sunday gave rise to allegations of voter suppression. This is amid a tense presidential runoff election between Brazil's right-wing president Jair Bolsonaro. Nicknamed Tropical Trump. Actually, like, if that's his nickname, I had not heard that one. We're reading from Forbes right now. I follow politics pretty closely, and I hadn't heard that one. However, foreign affairs are also not my thing. Tropical Trump.
Come on, man.
So between Bolsonaro and leftist former president Lula da Silva, that could steer the country in dramatically different directions. Brazil's Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes, the head of the country's election agency, has ordered the highway police chief to prove officers weren't violating election rules to help Bolsonaro. Now I can't say it right. Bolsonaro Bolsonaro in the election. This is according to the New York Times. The highway police had stopped more than 550 buses across Brazil by Sunday afternoon. An anonymous federal highway officer told the Times, citing internal data during the first round of voting earlier this month. During the first round of voting earlier this month, the agency stopped nearly 300 buses. Moraes told a reporter Sunday that despite the interruptions by police, election officials' preliminary investigation found all the buses reached polling stations, saying they didn't have any voters who didn't vote because of the operations. Apparently, police agreed to stop the operations by Sunday afternoon.